All righty. Good morning, everyone. Um, we're back to our community practice sessions, and we probably need to review a little bit Shinjin Sensei because we
Okay.
have new folks and kind of tell folks what community practice actually is. So usually on second Sundays, it's a little bit different. We have people circle up. It's not just a strict rote Dharma talk like we normally do. It's more about really the Dharma in realization of that within community practice and our individual practices, etc. So this year we started studying the Paramitas. And what we've been doing, if you have access to the ASDC website, under teachings, go to community practice and teachings, and then there's a drop down called community practice. And so it outlines what we've been doing for second Sundays throughout the whole year, except that I think there's a couple that we share with our Gasho newsletter SMEs, so they come and talk to us. So, but we're using this book as a reference to call the Six Perfections. It's by Dale S. Wright, and it's available on Amazon, used bookstores, etc. But it's like one of the classic books talking about the Paramitas. And we're also referencing Hojo Sensei's lectures that when he had an Emory class. So we're using all these tools, and all that information is linked online. So again, please check that out. If you have any questions, please send us an email to the ASDC info, and we'll get you caught up. But so far, we've gone through several of the Paramitas, and let's do a quick review of what we've done, because I love Shinjin Sensei's analogy about the faucet, and I want him to be able to share that too as well. But we started off this year talking about generosity and what that looks like. And the framework that we use to talk about these are the way our Sangha is set up. It's the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is the actual practice of Zazen. The Dharma is the teaching, and also the Sangha, that's again the community, how those are realized. So as we're talking about the Paramitas as an extension of our precepts, we talk about how those are relevant in each of those areas. So the way this usually works is we have one of our teachers, in this case, Shinjin Sensei has been my partner in crime throughout this series. And he'll break down the definition of what it is, and then I'll kind of pull out of we'll talk about what each of these are in reference to how they present in our personal practice, in our communities, and in the world. So again, that's a pretty kind of a catch up. But Shinjin Sensei, can you just kind of reference a little bit about the faucets, and you'll see the Paramitas mentioned as flowers and just different things. Just kind of give us a kind of an overview of the Paramitas in general.
Sure. Yeah. Since it's been a couple of months since we've done this, we'll catch everybody up, put everybody on the same page, and this will probably help our beginners out a little bit. The six Paramitas, or the six perfections, they're usually tied to the third noble truth, that there is a way out of suffering. So these can be looked at as what we can do to implement our path out of suffering. The word paramita is Sanskrit for the highest action. So these are considered the highest actions that we can take in order to transcend our worldly issues and reach enlightenment. In the Mahayana tradition, there are 6 paramitas. In some of the older Theravadan traditions, they count 10. But since we are a Mahayana order, we're going to stick with 6. And the first one is dana, or generosity. The second is sila, or morality. The third one is ksanti, or patience. Fourth is virya, diligence, or energy, vigor, what we're going to be talking about today. Then concentration, dhyana, and finally wisdom, which is prajna. And we just chanted the Heart Sutra, and Prajna Paramita is actually mentioned several times in the Heart Sutra. As a matter of fact, it's emphasized to the point where every time we say Prajna Paramita in the Heart Sutra, the Doan hits the gong. Okay, so obviously this is a very very important concept. And when we started this, kind of hit on a metaphor for the 6 paramitas and how they kind of function together. And I look at them as a bank of faucets. And Prajna Paramita, the wisdom, is kind of this master faucet that controls the flow of the other five. Because if you look at these, you can go overboard in any of them. You can be too generous to where you're harming yourself. You can be so moral that you become pedantic and self-righteous. You can be so patient that you lose the ability to act. So each of these, they have their tipping point where you hit the angle of repose, where it's no longer a virtue and actually becomes something that's harming you. Couple of things on since we're talking about Virya today. A couple of notes. It's usually translated as energy or vigor. But the actual translation, like a lot of Sanskrit words, doesn't translate to anything directly in English. So one of the things that we'll have to do in this talk is we're going to have to figure out exactly what that concept means. A 5th century Sri Lankan teacher, whose name is very difficult to pronounce, so I'm not going to butcher it. He said that the state of one who is vigorous, its manifestation is non-collapse, just as new timbers prevent a house from falling, or strong reinforcement enables an army to defeat the enemy. Energy should be regarded as the root of all attainments. So that's kind of interesting. That's kind of making this almost like a linchpin of the other paramitas. And as I mentioned, the translation is still really fuzzy. There is no direct English translation for Virya. Energy, vigor are all a little bit simplistic. So one of the other translations that's been suggested is spiritual diligence, which I think is kind of interesting. And plus, if you look at energy and vigor and diligence just on their own, that doesn't really reflect anything moral or ethical. Serial killers are diligent. Terrorists are diligent. So we have to take some care with the paramitas. On their own, they may not be the thing that really helps us. But
Shinjin Sensei, the other thing too, when we started talking about the morality and the kind of the ethics that underlie the practice, that's kind of connected exactly to what you're saying, because it's not that it stands by itself alone. It's that you have these, like the thoughts that they're connected to each other.
Yeah.
They're interconnected. So all of them with our precepts work together to form the foundation of the way we practice, I think.
Oh,
the same pipe.
Yeah. I agree completely. And there's a couple of interesting passages from the book that we're using, the textbook, Wright's The Six Perfections. And I thought this point was really interesting, that in the transition from the first 3 perfections to the final set of 3, in the classic text of Mahayana Buddhism, it announces a significant shift of emphasis. In the first 3, generosity, morality, and tolerance are appropriate practices for anyone. The final 3, energy, meditation, and wisdom, operate at a higher level of spiritual awareness and therefore tend to be the focus of monks, nuns, and others who give priority in their lives to spiritual practice and insight. So that's really interesting, because if you go to Asia, a lot of Asian countries that are predominantly Buddhist, what you see is a very different practice for monks and nuns than you do in lay people. Thailand and Nepal, two that I've visited myself, when the monks sit or meditate or chant, they're in a separate area from the temple, and the public doesn't have any interaction with that at all. And you never see anybody in the temple from the public side of it sitting. They're in and out, it's completely chaotic, but the monks are kind of sequestered off. So, that kind of shines some focus on this, that, you've got 3 paramitas that are available to anybody, but the path consists of 3 higher paramitas. And lastly, one passage that I thought was really interesting is that courage is considered an essential component of the quest for self-transformation. As the Bodhisattva develops the perfection of energy, he has said that he is not afraid. He is impregnated with the strength that he has gained, and that enables him to persist in his endeavors and to think it is not the case that I shall not be fully enlightened. So I think that's a pretty interesting thing. Because when you look at the practice of Soto Zen, and you look at sitting, I mean, you kind of have to face facts. It's not a lot of fun. It's not what your body wants to be doing. It's not what your brain wants to be doing. We have to develop this diligence to even do this in the first place. I mean, you start sitting and you're 5 minutes in and your back's starting to hurt, your hips starting to hurt, your mind's all over the place, and a lot of people get up and walk out at that point. So just to get to the end of a sitting period is quite a bit of diligence, quite a bit of energy, and to come back for another one, is even more, and to come back again a few days later. And keep coming back and keep sitting at your at home when you're not here in the Zendo, that requires an incredible amount of diligence. And the other thing is, when you look at the Eightfold Path and you look at the four in the middle that are essentially talking about how we interact with others, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, to keep that on track, to keep that in balance, which is, it doesn't mean right versus right wrong. It means righted like a wheel in balance, is an incredible amount of hard work. So I think that's what they're talking about when they use the word virya.
Yeah, this is actually my favorite Paramita, because like Shinjin Sensei is speaking about, and also let's really think about what this means in lay practice, because I feel like I feel like in lay practice you have to even add additional effort and vigor, because we're not contained within a monastery. That's not our total focus. So we actually have to make additional time in the busy day of everything we're doing, between work, between kids, between job hunting, between all of that stuff, to really make the effort to show up at the cushion, either in the morning, at lunch, or wherever. So I really want to, get people's feedback related to like the opportunities that they experience in their day-to-day practice, and how some of the things that you work with, what arises. Because I mean, this is the part where, as a sangha, we want to be able to, this is on paper, we hear what you say, but what does that really mean in real time? Because I'm all about bringing the teachings forward, and I'm like, but so what? That's great. I like somebody wrote it down, but what does that actually mean to us? So when you said that about how they segregate like the monks and the nuns to the separate part of the monastery, that's interesting, kind of like in that country. But I really would love to hear your thoughts about that vigor and effort from a lay perspective.
Well, I just about every one of the patriarchs that spoke about the subject said that lay practice is much harder. I mean, think about it. You think about a monastery. I mean, all you got to do is get up, sweep the place, sit, listen to somebody talk, sit some more. Somebody else is doing the cooking. I mean, I can't imagine anything easier. I mean, I don't have to worry about commuting. I don't have to worry about a job. All I got to do is sit here. I mean, sure, you take that practice outside of a monastery, and you've got personal relationships that can get difficult. You've got your job that can get difficult. Any number of things that you might take on. I think it makes it much more difficult and much harder. Because you got to look at it this way. Say, you're living in a monastery. How many stimulus are you hit with? You're not in traffic. You don't have a boss who's probably got personality disorders. You don't have any of these other things that really are going to kind of knock you out of that state of samadhi, or knock you out of a situation where the Eightfold Path is easy to stay on. Yeah, so I think lay practice is going to be much more difficult.
Let me, I don't know, go pass me that wireless mic, because I know Hojo's almost to speak a little bit. And hit the button on the front to make it green. Just click it. There you go.
Yeah, just briefly, following on what Shinjin and Fusatsu said about carrying this practice into modern life, and an example of overweening diligence, perhaps. This morning, I was packing up some things to bring to one of our other members here, and 8:30, I was trying to get in the truck and get up the driveway, so Diane had to pull her car out. And so I'm zooming up the driveway and pulling onto the street, and we're right next to a stop sign intersection. And I'm looking to the left to see traffic, and Diane is turning to the right. And so I go ahead and pull out in the street and miss by about 12 inches a car coming that had just come through the stop sign. And so I'm thinking, if I'd hit that car, my whole day would be taking care of that, and I wouldn't even be able to get here this morning. So I think, to Fusatsu's point, we're living under a whole lot more pressures. And Matsuoka Roshi would often say, your enlightenment will be even greater than Buddha's. People ask me what I thought he meant by that. And I said, I think the 2,500 years count. And if you can come to that kind of realization in the context that we find ourselves practicing in, you're going to have to go some. It's going to take some effort.
That's right. And before I open it up, some of the things that Shinjin Sensei said also, because I had to do a paramitas were near and dear to my heart, so I chose to write on that last semester. So some of the other words that came up with, you heard energy, you heard diligence, vigor, effort, heroic effort, joyful effort, exertion, joyful endeavor, zeal, enthusiasm. This was interesting. Liberated enthusiasm, persistence, focusing spirit, and advancing single-mindedly, continuously cultivating good and cutting evil, pure unadulterated progress. That was an interesting one. Pure unadulterated progress. Strenuous and sustained effort to overcome laziness, strength of character, persistence of effort for the well-being of others. I have to say this because when Shinjin was talking about us coming back and our legs are going to sleep, our feet are hurting, our mind is wandering all over the place. We have something called Sesshin, where we have like a really extended sitting to where we're doing it. Some people do it months at a time. Charlotte Joko Beck called those opportunities as containers of sustained suffering. So it just depends on kind of how you look at it. But I would really be interested, before we kind of break it down a little bit more, mind, body, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, what are some of others' thoughts about what comes up for them when they're talking about their vigor and their practice, and in other kind of facets of their lives related to this? Is what are some things that you're bringing that helps you sustain your practice? And also, what are some things, because we know Zazen is good for nothing. I mean, it's great that we sit, but we're not trying to get anything out of it. So how do y'all work with that too? So I'm going to open it up to the room and online. So please don't be afraid or shy. As y'all know, just come off of mute if you're online and just start speaking, so we can make sure. And if you're in the room, just wave your hand and we'll get you the mic. Okay, so let me pause to allow people to respond, comment, reflect, whatever you're feeling in this moment about vigor.
Not much vigor.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that one. Let me see if it works.
Hello?
No, let me get the other one. That one's a little bit low. Yeah. Was the green light on that one? Yeah.
My name's Chance, for those of you who I haven't met yet. But for me, because I'm kind of still a beginner, haven't had a lot of practice time.
And also, it's great because we're all trying to get back to our beginner's mind. So don't think that's a bad thing.
Okay, right. Okay. But for me, it's just getting myself to just sit in the morning, because I'm tired from the work the day before, I have things that I've slept on, stuff like that, and it's getting myself up in the morning. That's the easy part to me. It's the rest of the day where I'm trying to stay within that Zen mind of just focusing on the now, keeping the right mind, all of that. I think that's probably the hardest part for me, to keep my vigor, just like I said, staying in that present mind, trying to keep my attention on the now. So.
And the thing that I'm going to give you really good kudos on is you're recognizing that you're kind of wanting to veer from, but you keep bringing yourself back to it, and the recognition that you're working with that is bigger, it's effort. So I mean, that's a big part of it. So keep doing that piece of it, because I think that's like you're moving right into what we're going to talk about. Like, what is that vigor looking like from a Zazen perspective? Because we're sitting there, we're looking at the wall, or I'm looking at that, and we're trying not to get distracted. But that's why a lot of the other teachings will start with breath work, and Sensei sometimes will also start to, when people are just first coming, making, getting them. It's like a muscle, like trying to get your mind to keep coming back, because that's the function of the mind, is to think. So we're not trying to get the mind to stop thinking. We're just trying to get it to kind of focus and to try to not be so all over the place like we do during the day. I mean, right. I woke up started a new job like just 4 weeks ago, and you come into a department and you're like trying to figure out, okay, what's going on, and then trying to get things. I'm waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I got a list of items. You know what I'm saying, right? Right. It's like through the day you're trying to figure out, like, what am I doing? And it's just like, but if you can get your mind to stay. I mean, the tools and the things that are set up even today, we're at work, a lot of us have those instant messenger chat things, and we're supposed to be paying attention on the call, but people are pinging us constantly. So right. You're correct, like how to get that single-minded, that focus. That's an opportunity, I think, in this speedy world. How do we continue to do that? And you're exactly what you're doing, recognizing when you're not doing it, and then coming back to the moment by moment.
I would love to tell you it gets easier. I would love to be able to say that.
And this is somebody that's been like almost 30 years in. Somebody that's been in almost 50 years. So it's the same. It's like when you're coming in and you have practitioners in different states. We're all doing the same thing. Nobody's Zazen is better than anyone else's. So yeah, you're doing exactly what you need to do. Just keep coming back. Keep coming back. Any other comments? Hojo Sensei? You pass the mic to him.
I'll follow up on what Shinjin said. It may not get any easier, but we do get better at it.
Nice. Out there in the ethers of the online world, any comments? Yes. Is that Chishiki?
In his car. That's awesome.
I'm pulled over to the side of the road. I apologize. I'm kind of going in and out of reception, but I'm really enjoying the talk, and I appreciate what you all are doing. And if I missed some of it, and my comment or my question covers something you've already talked about, I apologize. But I was thinking, from my own, I mean, again, to kind of speak from my own practice and to kind of pull this into Sangha, you guys are talking about vigor and courage, and that lay practice is very difficult. And recognizing the importance of Sangha and the 3 jewels, it seems like the biggest problem with lay practice is, I guess from a Buddhist perspective, you'd call it afflictive doubt, right? I think when you start off practicing, you might notice your mind, and if you can realize how crazy that carnival is in there, and you kind of continue to practice. But especially during the pandemic and since then, it does seem like Sangha is, in some ways, it's expanding online, and in some ways, it's diffusing. It's diffused a little bit in person, and it seems like that glue is really important to kind of to have that courage and that vigor to sort of know you're on the path with a group of like-minded practitioners. And I think that sort of waxes and wanes. And I guess maybe I was hoping you all could comment on maybe what your perspective is on how to maintain that connection which motivates, kind of going forward. Because I think, I assume everybody, I'll speak for myself, but I find that, during the pandemic, in some ways things got better, and in some ways things felt less connected and less sort of like we're in this together. And I just wonder, it's more of a comment than anything else. And maybe Hojo Sensei, or maybe Shinjin Sensei, or April, or Fusatsu, maybe you guys can all comment and just kind of talk about sort of how you maintain vigor, how you maintain faith, how you maintain motivation and strength on the path when sometimes it feels challenged.
I really like this comment, and it kind of dovetails into what Chance brought up a second ago. And I think over your lifetime in Zen, I think that your method for maintaining vigor is going to change. It's going to be different things at different times. And I remember when I first started coming here, I kept coming back because I was convinced that there was going to be a really worthwhile goal at some point. That it would be kind of like my experience in martial arts, that I would earn a black belt someday, and that's what kept me coming back for a really long time. And one of the most profound experiences I ever had sitting, I remember the first time very distinctly that I sat down with absolutely no intent whatsoever. So I think the first time that I just sat, and I had been here for 7 years when that happened. And so I think that what keeps you coming back is going to change. So, I kind of shifted from this goal-oriented reason for being here. And now, I've been here so long, I don't know what else I would do. My attitude about it now is totally different. I mean, my attitude now is like, this is a big chunk of my life's work. Where else would I be? So I think that's a really good question and or comment. But I guess what I would say is, your reason for being here, your reason for maintaining diligence is going to change. And one of the most interesting things somebody ever said to me about martial arts, we were discussing technique, and he said that if your why to fight is strong enough, the how really doesn't matter that much. So, I don't really know how to answer that other than that. But I would, toss it back to you and say, what is it that keeps you coming?
Well, I think, I think in some ways it's what you said. I think it's getting, if you have a why, the how doesn't matter. I think on the one hand, I think on the other hand, to get to the point that you do it out of habit without any sort of expectation with regard to practice, I think is important. It's hard to get to that point though. And I think, you all were talking about this in the beginning, Mike, Shinjin Sensei, I think you made a really strong point that it's easy to practice when you're in a monastery. And I think the whole point of us having these community dialogues is to talk about maybe the challenges of lay practice. And I think it is challenging in some ways. And you're asking me the question, and I don't know. I think I've asked the same question probably 5 different ways at different points along the path, and whenever it comes up, because I think in some ways this is the crux of lay practice. How do you maintain your motivation and your drive when the Sangha isn't a group of people that you wake up with every morning? It's a group of people that get together and flux and change, and sometimes you feel connected to them and sometimes you don't. I would imagine in a monastery, it's probably the same, but I would imagine it's a lot different. And I think Buddhism sort of developed in a monastic setting, and then it sort of adapted to lay practice. And now we're adapted to being online and sitting in a car to listen to a Dharma talk. It's always changing. And that's always an interesting question, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not really answering the question that you threw back at me. I'm just saying, it's an interesting question. It's something worth paying attention to, and I appreciate your answer, and thank you for your teaching.
Thank you. Maybe well.
I don't know if anybody else wants to pick up. I don't know if
Gee.
anyone else wants to pick up that thread.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We all want to pick up that thread. Again, first of all, tell Kylie to lean a little bit to her left so we can say
hey to Kylie.
hey to Kylie. Yeah. Thank you. So, the Sangha, as a lot of people know that know me, is near and dear to my heart. So for me, it is the stew for where we work with whatever arises, good, bad, ugly. It is the place where we can work with a lot of the stuff that arises in our practice. So you mentioned during the pandemic, how we figured out how we could be together. I mean, we cut the TVs on. We couldn't physically be together, but we were in these little boxes, just like you and the Super K over there. Y'all are in the boxes, but it enables a way for us to connect. Is that the only way? No. For me, it is something special that you cannot get. We didn't know if it was going to be able to sustain when we were in the boxes during the pandemic, but wow, it actually worked. Is it different than actually physically being in a space? Yes. But it's something about energetically being in a same room with people that are committed to showing up and sitting, to working with our delusive, crazy minds and recognizing we're all kind of got this in common. So for me, I feel like that's so helpful, to know that I'm not doing this alone. And, when Hojo Sensei's, bringing new people in doing Jukai, and you hear the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas from past, present, and future. We are not alone. We're continuously supported by our Sangha, our ancestry, from the past and future, those that have not even stepped or recognized that they're already on the path. For me, this is the place that is juicy, is really being able to be together in the practice. And this is what keeps, I know for me, coming back. So again, Cheese nickname is the Big Cheese, not the Big Cheese, but he's always dropping stuff for us he drops the bomb and thinks he's going to get an answer, but there's no answers in Zen. So if you come in here, we all came here, we're trying to figure stuff out, but we realized that every time we're asking one of our teachers, they didn't really answer the question. You're not going to get an answer. But we keep coming back because something that's resonating within this practice for each and every single one of us. So let me pause there. I'm let me put y'all back on gallery because Chi, please come back to comment from the car.
I was just going to say, I think you're right. I don't think there is an answer. The answer is to stay on the path. And I think the comments that you all have made are very, I think they add to that vigor because I think that they motivate. We are all on this path together, and I think that's part of why Sangha is important. And I appreciate where you guys have gone with this. So thank you. And I'm gonna turn my video off and get back on the road, so I may be in and out of reception. But I appreciate you all taking the time to talk around the issue.
Please continue to be vigorously paying attention while you are in Super K or on the road. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we've got two hands up.
Yep. Let me get back to gallery so I can see folks. Let me remove that pin. Let me go back to gallery. And let's go with John first. And then I don't know who the other hand, but please feel free to come off.
It's Bill.
It's Bill. Okay, so let me see if I can, hold on. Let me see if I can do something really cool here. I'm going to add this pin here. And let me see if I can add the other pin. I'm trying to be kind of a tech savvy here. All right. Bam, there we go, it worked. So, okay, let's go John, Bill, and then we'll open it up again.
Thank you all for this engaging, enlivening topic, lay practice. I feel like I'm about to make a few comments that have already been made, but filtered through one set of conditioned experiences. For me, the sitting each morning is certainly an important piece for settling emotionally, cognitively, settling into and opening to a wider space, so to speak. However, the meaningful part for me personally is taking that in that heightened sense of awareness off the cushion into day-to-day life. This is the payoff, the meaningful part, when I can constantly catch myself in the middle of my own personal psychodrama. And the shift that I work with looks like this. Instead of experiencing, I'm tired, I didn't get enough sleep last night, or that pisses me off, I'm angry. Occasionally being able to take a step back. And for me, it looks like this. I'm experiencing tiredness. I'm noticing anger coming up. Okay. Can I breathe into that and just be with it? And that's something that I do all day long, constantly catching myself in the self-created movie of my life that I star in, and taking a step back and saying, wait a minute, there is something fishy about a drama where I'm always the star. And sitting helps me open up a little bit to that construction.
Well, that's very interesting. I think, in a way, you've just described the other 4 aspects of the Eightfold Path that we didn't mention previously. One way to look at this is you've got the 4 that we already mentioned that are kind of how we deal with other people. The other 4, right view, right understanding, right concentration, right meditation, in a way, are how we deal with the self. So I think being able to step back and say, I am experiencing anger, as opposed to, I'm angry, therefore it's a bad world. I'm angry, I must act out. You know, that those are radically different things. A reaction, I think what you're describing is the ability to respond as opposed to the need to react, which sitting is going to train you to do. Just because, for one reason, the effect that it has on the plasticity of the brain. So I think that's a really good point.
And John, I'm always looking for what's going to be the theme for me to work on every week. And I think the melodrama of I am the actor in my melodrama. What's the consistent thing? That's going to be the thing that I'm going to be meditating on week. So thank you so much. That's like something I'm going to really work with. Ungin Sensei.
Thank you. How does one maintain his or her vigor? I think Dogen had a good comment when he called it self-fulfilling samadhi. If you sit and practice, the more you sit and practice, you find out it works. And the more you find out it works, motivates you to do it even more. So it's a self-fulfilling type thing, self-fulfilling samadhi. Secondly, this idea that it's easier to be in a monastery than in lay practice, I think I would do a 180 on that one. I'd much rather be out here in the real world with different things happening all the time. than I had to be sitting in a monastery day after day after day. I would think the burnout factor would be terrible. And secondly, you know, problems are really in your mind. We got problems out here in our daily life, but those folks sitting in a monastery, they've got just as many problems in their mind. Might be different types, but I'd much rather be in a lay practice than I had in a monastery. But thank you very much for the teaching. I've enjoyed this one.
And just, I don't know if anybody, please, if somebody's been in the monastery, I've been in communication with a lot of folks that have been in a monastery. And if you're on a priest path, you probably have been in the container of contained suffering for a longer periods of time. But I've consistently heard them, Hojo, say that it's not easy being stuck in there with so many different people over and over again. It's just like I mean, can you comment on that? Because you know, further down the path, and I have not. They say it's difficult in a different way. Can you speak a little bit about that for us?
My only experience has been AAG a couple of times, SOGG, and only for a limited amount of time. But we got to talk to the monks. We got to see the Japanese men who were sitting with us at AAG. And afterwards, Matsunaga-san was, he was the English-speaking department at AAG. So we had a last day with him, and we're sitting and talking. They let us go in the kind of historical room where they stored all of these artifacts, including a long glass case that had one of Dogen Zenji's original scrolls lying in there with his brushes and everything. So it was quite touching and compelling experience. But talking to Matsunaga, he said he had come to America and tried to set up a Zen center, and it failed, and he went back to Japan. He said, so we don't really know what to, you know, tell you how to do it over there, because it's just not the same as it is in Japan. Of course, Keiko here is from Japan. She can fill you in on some of those details a little bit more. But there was a point at which Minami-san, who is our host, who kind of took care of us, there were only two of us there, a psychiatrist, one of my senior disciples, and I. This was back in '89. And I can't remember how it came up, but he was breaking out the chocolates and giving us chocolate candy and things. And I said something, he said, oh no, this is happy time. This is happy time. We didn't have to be serious. So I'm thinking, well, from that perspective, you're there, as we're saying, day after day after day after day. Certainly opens up the window of opportunity, but it really increases the sameness factor way overboard, I think. Sandokai, harmony of sameness and difference, you could see it in the practice where you're on retreat, you are asked to sit in the same place. Don't move around, right? Don't sit here today and someplace else tomorrow, et cetera, et cetera. So what you're doing, you're ratcheting up the sameness. And the way I look at it is that way the difference can come out. Then the practice of going to different places to practice is you're ratcheting up the difference. That way the sameness can come out. But you can't avoid the sameness difference duality, no matter what you do.
Ungen Sensei, did you have any other comments on that one? You good?
Thank you.
So let me try to unpin you. Hold on, bear with me. There we go. All right, and then let me throw it back on gallery to see if there's any other hands up or comments or personal experience with monastic life. Again, there is huge value for folks that are consistently contained in that environment, and it was so great when we have lay interaction with people, monastics. It brings the richness of both ends of the practices out, and it allows us to be able to get benefit of both. And Keiko, can you break it down to us? Give us some Japanese perspective from. Is the green light on for you? Okay.
I couldn't say I have had a long enough experience of practicing in monasteries, but what I hear and read in a small experience that I've been in Japan and went to a temple for just a regular weekend sit. Some temples can be strict, and they do have all these very rules for everything you would do, and they could be strict if you don't do it right. Sometimes you could be yelled at, and I have experienced being yelled at a nun that was at a temple. I also hear that Eiheiji could be pretty strict in practice, but depending on the person, this perspective, they would also say that it comes out of kindness. So they could appreciate the kindness of the monks, that they are trying to lead you to the way to practice. And as Hojo Sensei mentioned, the sameness, the repetitive, something that you feel that is the same, and the repetition would be hard, could be also a way to be creative yourself, to find the differences in the sameness, and that's up to you. And I think that kind of practice maybe in a temple in Japan, that you would have repetitiveness and you would feel that it is something that is painful, or that would be a suffering, but then you can change the perspective. I think Zen has a lot to do with that kind of your own perspective, how you would look at it.
A capping note on that, when we were in Eiheiji in 89, the monks definitely yelled, but they didn't yell at us, the two Americans. We had two Japanese gentlemen practicing with us, and we were washing dishes, and they were yelling at them for wasting water. And you could tell that they were saying, even the gaijin are doing better than you are, you know, even these Americans.
And John, I see the hand up.
Just a quick personal comment. I accepted an invitation from the Atlanta SOTO Zen Center and Hojo about 30 years ago. Hojo, you may remember this. I think it was Lake Allatoona. I think it was an old Boy Scout camp. And as a young beginning sit on retreats kind of person, I had done maybe a weekend once or twice. Bottom line, we simply sat for 7 days facing, and I'm saying this in my own words, 7 days facing a blank wall for 12 hours or so, with an occasional break. We did walking meditation. We did have meals, and Hojo spoke once a day. I want you all to know I jumped into the deep end. That was one of the hardest weeks, sitting, doing nothing all day long. And I'll just say it. There were times when I would rather have been taken out back and beaten with a 2x4 and had that experience.
And since you opened it up, thank you so much. That was such an interesting visual picture, but Sesshin, just at Saturdays, retreat, those are the times when we put ourselves in that exactly that environment that John is speaking about, because having done extended retreats, it takes about, and Hojo Sensei, I want you to, Shinjin Sensei, since y'all have been sitting so long, to speak about it, how it takes, when you're coming out of a busy world, constant, it takes about 3 or 4 days to get into, and John, I would love to get your feedback on this too, because you did that 7-day. It takes a couple of days to get your mind to just settle down. It's just like when you're shaking up a jar with the coffee, pieces in it, and it's just settling, because we're coming out of this crazy, hectic, busy world. So by the time that your mind settles, and this is what the benefit of that extended practice is, it's grinding, it's churning, it's but about the third or fourth day is what, for me, I can just speak for me, what it takes. It's about that fourth end of the third day when you have just exhausted, your mind is just exhausted itself out. It has nowhere to go, but it just has to stay. And it gets a little bit easier for, in reference to people that are sitting in the morning and in the evening. I would love to hear feedback about how you come in the morning, it may be not as stimulated versus in the evening. It takes me longer to settle down from my busy day. So I just would like Hojo Sensei and John to comment about the settledness and the extended retreat process, and also the day-to-day, like, on the front and the back end of practice.
Just quickly, and then I'd like Shinjin to give you his classic trademark comment on Rohatsu. but yes, when you sit in a retreat, you sit for an hour, you come here and sit in the morning. I come from a musical family, as many of you know, jazz musicians, my dad and my brother. It's kind of and Shinjin here is a fantastic musician. It's kind of a crescendo effect. It's kind of like a shape, like a crescendo. It like reaches a peak and then it drops off. And the dropping off is not negative. It's like, okay, I'm over the hump now. I'm going downhill. Then if you sit in a 5-day retreat, hump day is Wednesday, middle of the week, and so you sort of, that same crescendo is happening every hour, every day, and the day itself has one. This is my experience. And then through the week, you have a peak experience somewhere past the midpoint of the week. And then, so it's interesting to see like a kind of a fractal emotional experience where you have these little peak experiences, moment by moment, hour by hour, and so forth, and then the day, and then through the week. So I think if, without building expectations, if you just embrace the idea that that is going to happen, and that's the natural process of adaptation. You're going through this process of deep sensory adaptation on every level, emotional, physical, mental, etc. And then, as Fusatsu is saying, when you come out of it, and now it's time to go home, and you get on the road and drive back to Atlanta from Watershed, for instance, you probably want somebody else to drive because you've got a reentry problem like we had back in the 60s from LSD and psilocybin and all those things. The next day you had to come down and sort of get back into it. And we have that kind of disorientation that sets in the longer the retreat, the more profound it can become. So be careful.
And the other piece before Shinjin Sensei comments is, this is when you're first starting to do this, it's so important. I feel like it's so important to have the support of a teacher, senior practitioners, because when you're sitting in those environments for a long period of time, stuff may come up that you didn't expect. So you may start dealing with some things that you need some support along the path on. I put that out there because it's happened. I've been on retreat where people just have totally just they've had episodes, they need support. I would not want to have you brand new folks that are, just new to this, that you need support. And this is where I lean back on the Sangha. Stuff happens for each and every single one of us. Sometimes it's stuff that we don't anticipate. So I just really want to kind of put that out there. And this again is a part of how we lean into the Sangha. So when you're sitting there and you're feeling like John, who wants to be taken outside and getting whipped would be better. Some people have different ways of dealing with that, and that some other people may need some additional support to work through stuff that arises during extended practice periods. Shinjin Sensei.
Well, the quote about Rohatsu. Rohatsu is where we sit all night once a year, outside in the freezing cold, to commemorate the Buddha's enlightenment experience. And so the kind of catchphrase became Rohatsu, because sometimes a little miserable just doesn't cut it. Yeah, and it's interesting because now we're bringing it back to diligence and back to energy, because you're sitting at Rohatsu and you're about 3 hours in and you're like, I can get up and leave. I've got car keys. I can go home. I don't need to be doing this. and then you get to, every time I've done Rahatsu, about the last 2 hours, everything gets incredibly funny, and then, when they finally hit the bell and you're done with this all night sit, I mean, there's been times where they've hit that bell and, my first response was, is that the best you got? I can stay out here another night, Yeah, so yeah, it's gonna change throughout the experience.
And John, did you have any additional comments? Did you settle in a little bit, like midway? Did you experience that too? And then how was it your reentry process after that? Can you speak a little bit about that?
I did notice those kinds of curves and arcs and settling in a little. And I got very, very present with this mental, cognitive, emotional restlessness, seeking, looking. As I sat facing the wall, this mind, this thinking would choose anything. A gnat flies by, and I'm right there with it. A bug crawls across the floor, and I'm on it, just looking constantly in this restless state of thinking continuously. And what that did for me is it gave me the starting point of staying connected as much as I can with this state that I live with day to day, that I'm just going to call restless seeking behavior. And the way that shows up is when I find myself moving toward, let's just say, social media, or moving toward some activity. I ask, am I moving because of a genuine interest in this direction? Or is this part of that lifelong conditioned restlessness? And sometimes that helps me clean up what I do with that restlessness and just not constantly move through life unaware, similar to like what you might be reaching into a bowl of junk food and mindlessly feeding yourself just junk food. I'll stop there.
Yeah. Don't just do something, sit there. Okay, we have a hard stop at quarter till, and so I think we probably got time for one more question or a comment. Anybody here? Okay, well, if we're all good, we'll go ahead and close out with the 4 vows. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your attention.
We are. We'll make some announcements after the bell. Yep, we'll make the announcements after the bells, folks. And again, before we start, thank you so much. This is exactly what community practice discussion is about. So please keep it coming. So we'll make announcements right after our closing.
Who's got the bell? Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible, I vow to enter them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it.
So just a couple of quick announcements. I see the mic was still on, so I hope that didn't cause any feedback. I do want to plug my book. For those of you who haven't heard it, maybe one of you, The Original Frontier. I'll pass it for the newcomers to see. And I wanted to say that we are having a wraparound retreat in October. It'll be this second weekend, and we'll have another one in December. And any information on that, I think you can find online, but it'll wrap around the Just Sit Saturday, Friday night, all day Saturday, Sunday morning. And then we have our conference coming up this year. The Silent Underwater Conference is in September, the last weekend in September. And the theme of that is going to be clarifying interdependence. And it's very similar to the themes we've talked about today, about how we function within a Sangha, and the Sangha functions within a larger community, those kind of issues that arise. I think we have 7 speakers all told. I can't remember. Yep. So there'll be afternoon talks, there'll be evening talks, and we hope some of you can come and sit with us in Atlanta, or if you're in Atlanta, you can come and practice in the retreat part of that. And then during the conference, my talk is going to be about the Zen Center of the Future, and the succession plan here, what we might look forward to in terms of how we would optimize our presence in Atlanta, including Watershed, which is Chi, who talked today, owns about a 100-acre farm up there that we use for country retreat, rural retreats. Some of you have gone up there. So there'll be kind of I hope, inspirational picture, a vision of where the Atlanta SOTO Zen Center and the Silent Thunder Order might go in the future. So we encourage as many of you who can to attend that. My talk happens to be on Saturday evening.
And for community practice, again, just as a reminder, our schedule is under the teachings, and it's community practice. Next September 11, Sunday, we actually have Dr. Dale Wright, who actually wrote this book. He's going to come and talk to us, about the Paramitas, and we'll engage in some discussion with him regarding that. So we'll kind of pause our discussion, like the individual, but we'll talk holistically about the Paramitas, and then we'll start back up after that, and we'll finish it out. But again, he was available to come in September. I couldn't not take advantage of that opportunity to have the person that wrote the book come and chat with us about it. And as always, we could not do the practice that we do here. We could not sustain our teachers with that we do here without the support of our Sangha. So again, if you find value in what we do and the things that we offer, and be able to support us into the future, please consider, again, thank you for those who are already consistent contributors, but those who are not, if you find value, please consider doing that. So we appreciate, above all things, your practice and your ability to have vigor showing up to the things that we do. We have morning sits, we have evening sits. We partner with our other sister Sangha. We have book clubs. Again, please check out all of the activities. There's no reason that you couldn't, if there's something, you can find something to get engaged in and what resonates with you. And again, if you would like to contact either one of our teachers, just please send us an email and we'll get you connected. But thank you so much. We appreciate your practice and your presence. And everybody have a great week. And thank you for showing up as always. God show everyone. Have a great week.